Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, August 24th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game, single digits, 9 days away. The game against Michigan in 93 days. If you watched last night's show, we did a live show, live from the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Tony Gerdeman and I answering a bunch of listener questions and talking about what we had learned from the wide receivers. And one of the things that we got asked about a bunch was all sorts of really detailed recruiting questions. We got asked about who does Ohio State still need to add to the recruiting class? Who are some names to know? Could Ohio State be the number one class in the cycle of 2024? And Tony and I, gave it our best effort, but we have recruiting guys for this. We know what we're talking about to a certain degree, but we have recruiting experts on staff. This is why you should become a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com so you get access to these guys. One of them is Marc Givler. He joins me today. We're going to answer the question of, will Ohio State finish with the nation's best class in 2024? But we're going to get to that. We're going to do this like math class back in school. We're going to make him show his work a little bit. So I guess, Marc, let's start right now. Ohio State number 2 in the nation, behind Georgia, a very solid number 2 class. They're at 20 commits, 21 commits, something like that right now. Where do they still need to potentially add someone? Give me a couple position groups where you're thinking there may still be work for them to do this cycle.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to add an offensive tackle. That's a big priority for them right now. One more offensive tackle to the class. That would kind of round out the offensive line. They are definitely looking for defensive linemen, at least one defensive tackle, and probably 2 edge guys. One of those could be kind of a tweener jack, but they want at least one more true defensive end, and they would take 2 more pass rushers, I think, for sure, if they could get them. And then you look in the secondary. There was a time where they would take 4 corners. Would they? Is there a 4th guy out there they would take right now? I don't know. They would definitely take another safety, if not 2. So they have some wiggle room here. I think they've basically filled the bare minimum needs in the defensive backfield, and especially on the offensive line, but they are trying to add numbers at those 3 spots, and they have to get a couple more defensive linemen. So there's we'll see. It's one of those things where the class initially we thought would be 27-28. Is it going to get there? That's kind of the $1 million question, and not to give away the whole answer to this podcast, but that's going to be the big question on your initial question.
All right, so let's start on the offensive line. You said they need tackles. They've got 4 guys in, but if you can get a 5-star tackle, it's always nice to get a 5-star tackle. That's good advice. Write that down. So who are the guys who are still maybe in the conversation to be that final piece of the puzzle on the offensive line this cycle, and how likely is it that any of them actually end up in the class?
Yeah, so it's still the big 3. Brandon Baker out of Mater Dei, Gerby Lambert out of Catholic Memorial there in near Boston, and Jordan Seaton at IMG Academy. And it's a little odd. People have continually kind of written Jordan Seaton off, and he's not saying it. Ohio State people are not saying it. So I'm not sure where that he kind of went off the grid there for a couple months when he transferred out of St. John's and went down to IMG, and he's been super serious about everything down there. I know he's working very hard. He's dropped some weight, looked phenomenal in their spring game that we saw back in May, and I'm hoping to get a chance to see them here pretty soon as well, so get another look at him. But Ohio State's going to get an official visit. I think part of the reason maybe why people wrote him off is this is going to be a fall recruitment. He really didn't spend too much time on his recruiting process in the spring and the summer. He's taking the vast majority of his officials will be in the fall. So he's probably going to visit Ohio State in October or November. He's not going to decide until at least Thanksgiving probably. So that one is still very much in play. I think Georgia probably leads right now. Alabama is making a nice push. But Ohio State's in that top 2 to 3. They're not like 7th or 8th right now. They're up there. They're in that top 2 or 3. I asked one of his closest people down there at IMG. I said, is Ohio State out? When that was kind of going around a couple months ago, they said, hell no. Was the response. So that's still in play. Brandon Baker is interesting. I don't want to say it's different from Dylan Stewart for me. I have different reasons, and it's not quite the weird feeling. Like, his list makes sense more than Dylan Stewart's list made sense. But when you're talking Ohio State, Texas, USC, Ohio State's all the way across the country, just the history of modern day, kind of being the bridesmaid there. I'm not sure. I think they're in it. I think they certainly think they're in it. Justin Fry's done a great job on that one, built a great relationship with Baker. I would just take the field right now, but it wouldn't stun me. It wouldn't be like the big stunner of this class. It would be less shocking than like Justin Scott, for example, if they got Brandon Baker. But they're in that one, and with Lambert, I don't see it happening. He's actually getting some pressure to stay home. I think he's probably going to go to Notre Dame, but I've been told, I have a couple people that know that program and know him very well, and they just insist not to count out Boston College, as crazy as that might sound. But I think he's going to end up on a small private campus is what I think is going to happen. I think Ohio State's a little too big. The campus is kind of its own city. And I think that's going to end up being part of the reason why he doesn't go to Ohio State. Again, I think the small private school is going to have the benefit here. So that's either Notre Dame or Boston College. But I think it's going to be Notre Dame. But, we'll see. I mean, he could decide soon, but we'll see. Like, either way, we'll see what Boston College does this year, because whether if he goes to Boston College and then the whole staff gets fired this year, well, that could change things. Or if he goes to Notre Dame or Ohio State and Boston College has a really good year, that could change things for them in a positive way. So we'll see what happens there. But, a good, or at least a decent shot at two of those three. I don't think they're going to get Lambert.
All right, so let's talk about the other side of that line of scrimmage, and let's talk about the defensive line. They've landed 2 5-stars. You got Justin Scott on the inside. You get Edric Houston, who just committed on Tuesday night on the edge. And then now the question is, how do you sort of wrap up this class? They need the bodies. They only took one defensive end last year, and Josh Mickens. Started questioning myself. Too many Joshes and Justins. Josh Mickens last year. Arvell Reese. Maybe he ends up there as an edge. Maybe he doesn't. But you certainly want to get more than one edge this year, so you got to add at least one more, maybe two more. Marquise Lightfoot was on the board, maybe looking pretty good, and then committed to Miami. Is he potentially someone they might be looking at flipping? I saw you talking on our board about Dominic McKinley. Let people know a little bit about him. And who else? Is there anyone else that looks like a real contender in that defensive line mix?
So with the defensive ends, I think they're gonna stay on Dylan Stewart, and Marquise Lightfoot. Do I think they've got a good chance of flipping Stewart? Not really. I actually think they have a very good chance of flipping Lightfoot. I think there's a lot of factors there that would allow them to flip Lightfoot, ranging from how Ohio State and Miami seasons go and how their defensive ends look and where those guys' draft stocks are in a couple months, to proximity from home, being from Chicago, how easy that is to get to Columbus, either by plane or by car. And just I think there's people in his camp that would prefer him closer to home and working with Larry Johnson every day. And just his relationship with Larry Johnson's great. And he's already talked about how he knows Larry's going to keep recruiting him and he's going to keep listening. So I think there's been enough there to be reasonably optimistic that Ohio State could still win out on that one. A name that could probably reemerge is Booker Pickett out of Florida. They never stopped recruiting him, but when it looked like they might get Lightfoot, Stewart, and Houston all within about a month, I think Pickett was kind of maybe the odd man out at that point, just because they probably weren't going to be able to take 4, and so if those guys were deciding first, and they maybe beat him to the punch, there was a chance maybe he would lose a spot. So that could reemerge here this fall. Again, that's a kid who's taking his time, so probably good timing for everybody on that front, where he wasn't a guy who wanted to commit early. So that's a guy to keep in mind. We mentioned Dominic McKinley. That's really an interesting name right now. The thing with him, obviously Louisiana, and when they offered him, they were late offering him. They didn't offer him until pretty late in the spring. And I kind of was asking about that, and, you know, is this real? Like, you know, big defensive lineman from Louisiana, that's not a high percentage play. And, you know, the answers that I was getting on that were that they vetted him very thoroughly in terms of legitimate interest. They kind of were honest with him and said, hey, we don't want to bring you up here for a free trip. So they had some conversations over the course of a few weeks, and I think they got very comfortable with the idea that he was serious about them, and they brought him up for the official. It went, you know, really well, and now it's kind of one of those things where there's some mixed info out there. There's 3 schools that seem kind of, I don't want to say like overly confident, but there's 3 schools that seem to feel kind of good about where they stand with him, which is always kind of a red flag. And it's really bizarre with Dominic because he's not a game player. He's very quiet. So he's not, I don't think he's telling everyone what they want to hear, but, you know, Texas feels good. LSU feels good. Ohio State feels optimistic. Ohio State contacts think he's leaving the state. LSU contacts obviously don't think he's leaving the state. But yet LSU contacts think Ohio State's the biggest threat, not Texas, who a lot of people think leads. So it is all over the map. I'm trying to figure this out myself. My best guess today would be Texas, just because it seems to be everyone seems to think he's leaving the state except LSU people. So I think he might. I think there's something to that. So I tend to think Ohio State and Texas might be in decent shape here.
I love that. I mean, this is why we're making you show your work here. A little how the sausage gets made, and you get conflicting information from 3 different parties. It's a little like trying to track down the current Ohio State quarterback, where the more people you talk to, the more unclear it gets who's going to be QB1 this fall. Might ask you about that before the show ends. But next, we do want to talk about defensive back, and this is an interesting one because the offensive line, defensive line, there have been names. There have been guys who you look at the uncommitted guys or potential flips, and it's like, yeah, there are a bunch of names we've talked about. Defensive back, they need another, 1, 2 maybe, and go ahead and wow me with all of the names that are very clearly top targets and very interested in Ohio State right now.
It's not a long list. Kobe Black's almost certainly going to Texas. Not getting Xavier Brown from Mater Dei. Zaquan Patterson's going to commit somewhere here this week, and it is not going to be Ohio State. But I do think there's a chance to get him up on an official in the fall anyway. I think there's again, we talk about the Miami factor because I think it's Florida State or Miami for Patterson at this point. And Florida State, normally I would say, well, Florida State's just the late smoke screen, but we just saw what happened with KJ Bolden, so you kind of have to take them seriously right now. I thought Patterson was going to Miami for a while. That's getting a little murky, but he's a kid who's probably going to take visits this fall anyway. So you're going to get him up on campus. We'll see. His teammates with Jeremiah Smith. We'll see what happens there. It's a non-zero chance. It's not a great chance, but it's a non-zero chance, and that's kind of the priority list, or the high-profile list. From there, I think there's 2 things. You have to look back at, like, okay, there's some guys in state that they kind of, offered, but, ended up kind of not really going full bore for. And Reggie Powers out of Centerville, Terrion Nichols out of Withrow. I just saw Terrion Nichols this past week on last Thursday. Was really good. I didn't have to do too much in coverage. I kind of dominated the game, but had several tackles, had a sack, made a couple of nice plays at or behind the line of scrimmage. I would personally pick things back up with Nichols because he can play corner. I think he can play either safety spot. He's tough. I think he can play up in kind of a nickel type of situation up in the box. I think he gives you the most versatility. So I would look there first, and then if you can get like a 5-star kid later in the process, you just add him to the mix. But to get to your quota or whatever, I would take a closer look at Nichols. The last guy, and I almost dread throwing this name out there because I know people are going to say, oh, Marc Givler's saying that there's still a chance here. I don't really think there's a chance here. I would not be surprised if Charles Lester made an official visit to Ohio State. I don't think he's coming. I think he's going to stick with Florida State, or maybe Alabama would flip him. But it would not shock me. He's with South Florida Express. No, they're going to get a bunch of guys up here on campus this fall for different games, and maybe have some guys on officials. And I just I would not be surprised if he makes an official and gets everyone all in a tizzy about it.
So you're telling me there's a chance. All right. As a wise man once said, so you're telling me there's a chance. So, all right, let's get to the question of the day, the question du jour. Who will Ohio State finish with the nation's best class in 2024? And you can grade this on a definitely not, maybe there's a very small chance, maybe it's close to 50-50, and very likely they do. Where on that scale does Ohio State finishing with the number one class in 2024 fall for you?
How about somewhere between there's a small chance and 50-50? How about somewhere in between there? I'm not sure if they're going to... They got to take the big number. They got to take the 27 or 28, and I just don't know. Are they going to take another receiver? I don't know. Are they going to take... How many defensive linemen are they going to get? Like, prime defensive linemen are they going to get? Are they going to look at some of these situations and say, you know what? We're good. We're going to go portaling in the spring. We're going to go get, Davison Igbenusson 2.0, Tywone Malone 2.0, and plug gaps with more proven commodities. That's really the $1 million question. If they take 27 guys or 28 guys, like, I would say they've got a better than 50-50 chance at that point, because Georgia's recruiting very well, but Georgia's taken some losses here. Ohio State fans are upset about KJ Bolden. What about Georgia? That kid's 45 minutes from their campus. They don't get Edric Houston. They don't get a lot of. There's some quarterbacks they've not been able to get. There's obviously they ended up getting Raiola, but they've had their misses this cycle. They lose Peyton Woodyard to Alabama. He flips. I believe they had another safety decommit as well. So I think Georgia is not like a lock. I think someone could close strong, whether it be Ohio State or an Alabama, and wrestle it away. But again, Ohio State's got to do kind of something they haven't done before, which is take that 27, 28-man class. And I just don't know that they're going to do that. I feel like they're going to end up taking 3 or 4 more guys, maybe 5, and then maybe going portaling instead of taking 2 or 3 more high school guys, maybe they go portal in the spring. But we'll see.
All right, so thus endeth the recruiting portion of the podcast. I do have to ask you the big question of the week. Mark, first snap against Indiana, who is under center or in shotgun, I guess, more likely, for Ohio State?
Yeah, I still think it's going to be Kyle McCord. There are certainly things that are appealing about Devin Brown, his athleticism. He's got a confidence about him that I think people really like. Look, Devin's had his moments during camp from the people I've talked to, that he certainly has, but it always seems to come back to McCord at the end when I talk to people, and I think it's been a legitimate battle. I don't think this has been all for show. I don't think this is to keep someone out of the portal or anything like that. I think they like both guys to an extent that they know they can win with both guys, but I don't think anyone has necessarily just taken it the way like C.J. Stroud did a couple of years ago. I think it is still close enough, and I think I've said this a few times. I think we're going to be seeing the shortest leash for an Ohio State starting quarterback since the 2015 debacle. So I don't know that this is going to be over, as they kick off against Indiana. Whoever it is, and again, I think it's going to be McCord, is going to have to play pretty well, or there's going to be some experimentation going on the next couple weeks after that.
All right, and now before I let you go, I normally wrap the show up with a big spiel about how everyone needs to join Buckeye Huddle, and yes, you still do. It is still, all the stuff I said is still applies. 9 days till kickoff. If you're not going to join now, what are you waiting for? All right, so set that aside. We got a whole nother website to talk about, Mark. We launched, I think, since the last time you were on the show, we have launched a whole new website. Let people know about Saturday Glory.
Yeah, so it's going to be a slower build than Buckeye Huddle. It's more of a passion project than anything right now. We're kind of taking our time, trying to find the right people to fit the certain roles we want to do. But we want to cover college football comprehensively, from recruiting through, obviously the football season and the transfer portal and NIL and everything, and all the way through, and have some NFL draft coverage. And I've got a few more people I'm talking to this week that we're trying to get on board and kind of fill different roles for us. But we've got a really good staff already. Jacob Benj is kind of covering the national college football landscape for us. He's a very talented writer. He's actually on the Ohio State beat for the last couple of years. And then we've got Kelly Ford and Tyler Shoemaker doing the Calculated Risk podcast, which if you like to bet on sports or if you just like to talk analytics and numbers, you have to. They're the two best in the business, and we were able to get them and combine them onto one podcast. So that's a must listen. And we've got, if you like this show, if you're listening to this show, you must like this show. How about this show, but on the national scale for college football as a whole, not just the Ohio State angle? Garrett Seawright, who has over 15 years of experience on ESPN radio. He's almost overqualified for what we're asking him to do here on some of the stuff, and he's been in radio for almost 20 years, and he's done a great job with that. And he's going to do a daily college football show for us, which has already started, the Daily Huddle. So if you're on YouTube, just go to youtube.com/@ Saturday Glory, and you'll find all the podcasts and content there. We post press conferences and media day coverage, and we'll have a bunch of different stuff during the season. I'm still doing the College Football Playbook podcast here. I'll probably do that about once or twice a week during the season, just kind of bringing on different guests and kind of talking about what's going on in college football. And so it's all free. There's no, it's not a premium website, so you can just check out the website, read it, listen to the stuff, no cost to anybody. And we're going to be able to have those guys under our umbrella. You may see them on the Buckeye Huddle message boards as well, be able to ask them questions and stuff. So I think it's a win for everybody.
Yeah, and should be a really, really interesting season. This is, about as wide open as seasons get in terms of the modern college football landscape. When you get people making their playoff predictions, you're hearing more different teams in there than you do in a typical year. So should be a really fun and fascinating year. So there you go. Now you have two more sites. YouTube.com/@CFE Playbook, YouTube.com/@Saturday Glory, SaturdayGlory.com, and plus all the Buckeye Huddle stuff you already know and love, all to make your college football season just a little bit more enjoyable. So there you go. Take it all in. College football almost here. 9 days till Indiana, 2 days till week 0. We are almost there, friends. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.